Welcome back, Math 098. We're doing Chapter 6, Section 4. We'll be dividing polynomials using long division and synthetic. And I was just letting you know ahead of time which ones have long division, which ones have synthetic. I just like long division more because it's more universal, whereas synthetic is more so used for linear binomials, I guess I should clarify that way. When we get to synthetic, which you probably did in Algebra 2, it'll make more sense. So a quick explanation on long division is getting you to think a little bit more about, being able to divide things and also being able to factor and what does it mean to be a factor. So if you look at this problem, if a problem is factorable, then you'll get no remainder. Just think about, like, I don't know, if you're asked to do 36 divided by 2, the old school way of doing it is 2 times 1 gives you 2, and then you subtract that number, which I'm going to come back to this in a little bit. So you bring the 1 down, 3 minus 2 is 1, bring the 6 down, and then 2 goes into 16 8 times, and 8 times 2 is 16, and when you subtract, you get a remainder of 0. So 2 is a factor of 36. The reason why I'm bringing that to your attention is because 5x is also a factor of all of these terms. So some problems are as easy as when you divide, it's just saying, okay, well, let's factor it. So 5 times what gives you 10? It would be 2. X times x squared gives you x cubed. 5 times 1 gives you 5. X times x gives you x squared. And then 5 times 4 gives you 20 when we divide the x out. So this is literally your answer, which is why we're doing it now. But what I'm going to do is introduce you to long division, which is written the same way as what we did over here, where 10x cubed minus 5x squared plus 20x gets written here, and we're dividing by 5x. So just like up here where I said 2 goes into 3 once, 5 goes into 10 twice, and then x goes into x cubed. Well, it's kind of a different way of thinking of it, but x squared times x gives you x cubed. So now you multiply this term by each piece here, and we get 10x cubed. 2 times 5 is 10. X squared times x is x cubed. To subtract off, just like what we did here. So these pieces cancel. We're left with negative 5x squared. So 5 times what gives you negative 5? Negative 1. X times what gives you x squared? X. And then multiply. And I would do it one more time. So you subtract off. Subtracting a negative turns into plus, so they cancel. And then that 20x, you do the same thing, be 4. I feel like I'm just repeating myself. So the answer is that 2x squared minus 1x plus 4. So as we move forward, I want you to practice the long division. AB squared. Now there is a 1 right here, by the way. We have 5a cubed b to the 4th minus 8a squared b cubed plus ab squared minus 8b. I should have given myself a little bit more room because I think I'm going to run out of space. But anyway, so what times 1 will give me 5? It would be 5. And what times a would give me a cubed? It would be a squared. And what times b squared gives me b to the 4th? That would be b squared. And what's nice about this problem is everything that I multiply by then will give me this exact answer. Now I realize that some people will realize that all of these will cancel, but when we get to this last term over here, that's going to be our remainder. So that's why I'm encouraging you to go through this, but I should have given myself a little bit more room. And then just bring the next term down. So what times 1 will give me negative 8? It would be negative 8. What times a gives me a squared? That would be a. And what times b squared will give me b cubed? That would just be a b. And like I said, as you multiply, you should get the same thing. And then when you subtract, it turns into plus, will cancel. AB squared. So what times 1 will give me 1? And what times A will give me A? Well, it'll be 1, but you don't have to write another one. What times B squared will give me B squared? That would be another 1. So again, as you multiply and then subtract, they'll cancel. Now, when you get the degree is smaller on this than what we started with. This is your remainder. So what do? We write our answer. 5a squared b squared minus 8ab plus 1. I like to write plus, then the remainder, over what we divided by, ab squared. That's what I want you to write. And I hope this makes sense, because let's do like, I don't know, let's do like 9 divided by 4, an old school problem. And maybe you went through this and said, okay, well 4 goes into 9 twice. 2 times 4 is 8. And you subtract, and we're left with 1. Now in the old school days, you'd probably write R1, the remainder is 1. Well, what does that really mean? That your answer is 2 1/4. Or if you type that into a calculator, it would say 2.25. $2.25. That's $2 1/4. Different ways of thinking of it. So just like when we did this problem, the remainder is really divided by the whole number that we were dividing by. It's the same thing for these polynomials. So as we move on to the next one, again, I want you to practice long division. You can do synthetic on this when we get to that part of the lesson, but I don't want you to do synthetic yet. So what you do is you ask yourself just the first piece. What times x will give me 3x squared? We don't care about the second part of this binomial yet. So 3 times 1 will give me 3. And then x times x gives me x squared. And the reason why we do it this way is because now we can multiply 3x by x to get 3x squared. But then you also have to do 3x times 3 to get 9x. So as I subtract off, I'm just trying to change colors to emphasize that this cancels, but this one does not, negative 2x. And bring that negative 6 down. Let's go back to blue. So same question now. What times x will give me negative 2x? That answer would be negative 2. And now do negative 2 times each of these pieces. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2x. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. And when you subtract off each piece, they both cancel, and you have no remainder. So what does that mean? That means that 3x minus 2 and x plus 3 are factors of this thing. So in other words, well, let me just write the answer. The answer is 3x minus 2. But the whole point of us doing that is for you to recognize that 3x squared plus 7x minus 6 is equal to that quantity of x plus 3 times 3x minus 2. So it's a different way of understanding how to factor. And you can get through all of this class, all of this textbook without understanding this concept. But I do think it's important as a math student to understand, so this is the answer I really care about. But what is that? Why do we do it? Is to understand that, we could have factored it and we would have gotten that same answer. And it only works when you have a factor, by the way. I guess I should clarify that. So here's another one where I want you to practice long division. And the reason why this one I would prefer long division, you could do synthetic if you've learned it, except it gets more complicated when the leading coefficient is not 1. But let's walk you through the steps. So just look at the 2x. 2 times what will give you 6? And then x times what will give you x squared? And now distribute that 3x to each term. So you get 6x squared minus 3x. The other piece to mention is when I first teach this to my students, a lot of students forget to distribute that minus to both terms. So this will cancel, but then a lot of my students have messed up that's negative 4x plus 8. So 2 times what would give me negative 4? Then x times 1 gives me x, so I don't have to worry about that. And then negative 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2. And then when I subtract, this cancels, but then I'm left with a remainder of 6. So that's your remainder. But I don't want you to write R6 up here. What I want to see is you write down plus the remainder over what we divided by. So what this means, since we got a remainder, 2x minus 1 is not a factor of this. So if I asked you to factor 6x squared minus 7x plus 8, one of the factors would not be 2x minus 1, because it's not a factor. And that goes back to understanding long division, out long division. The remainder should be 0. I think I have enough time for at least one more. And again, you can do synthetic on this one. It's a linear binomial. And if you want to, you could actually pause the video and try it on your own. Hopefully I don't have any mistakes as I do it. So all I did is I thought about what times x gives me 5x cubed. That would be 5x squared that I'm now distributing to each piece. And now as I subtract, this piece will cancel. 9 minus 15 gives me negative 6. So x times negative 6x would give me negative 6x squared. I gotta scroll down here. Negative 6 times 3 is negative 18. But now as I subtract, I'm going to change the sign of each of those. So that's negative 2x now. So x times negative 2 gives me negative 2x. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. And as I subtract, I have a remainder of 36 over what you divide by. Yeah, so again, x plus 3 is not a factor of this cubic polynomial. So I'm going to go to the next slide, and I could definitely work through at least one of these, but I would encourage you to pause the video and try to do this. Again, long division is a long division always works. As you're setting up the problem though, what you'll also notice that I do sometimes is I put a 0 when I'm missing a term, because that is going to be important as we move forward. So again, you might want to pause the video, try to work through it, otherwise you can see how I would do the problem. 2x squared times x squared gives me that. But notice how I'm lining up 2x squared times 1. That way when I subtract these off, this will cancel, but then I have 3x cubed minus 2x squared. And if it helps, you can write all of it. So whoops, I wrote that in the wrong spot. 3x times x squared gives me 3x cubed. But as I subtract off, this cancels. Definitely running into the next problem. And then minus 2. So as I distribute, minus 2x squared, that becomes a minus 2. And change the sign. So this cancels. And my remainder, I like to put a plus, by the way, minus 8x plus 4 over what I divided by, x squared plus 1. If you ever get stuck with the remainder, you can stop when the degree down here, negative 8x plus 4, the degree is smaller than what I divided by. The degree is 1 is smaller than x squared. So I'm going to pick up on exercise 7 in the next video.